lived in DC, solar panels on my house and an aggressive renewable portfolio standard was part of how we were able to afford them, to offset the cost with solar renewable energy credits, neighborhood co-op buying power. So I am very much a believer in these efforts. So just wanted to get that before you headed out.
Great.
Yes, continue. Good luck.
Thanks.
So my apologies that as you learn more about me, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So those of you who are parents or around small children will understand that I'm always slightly sick. So I'm somewhere between Katharine Hepburn, Lion in Winter, and Henry Kissinger. We'll see where we land, but I'll do my best. So apologies for the projections. First and foremost, why am I even doing this? Why am I running for Congress? And the answer to that is, I feel that I am answering the call. And it's a call to serve because with humility, I think I am the best to get things actually done in Congress for the working class and for a progressive agenda. Now, the reason why I think I'm the best is a slightly longer story, and that's what we'll get to now. And this goes back to the last time I felt I had to answer a call, which was after the 9/11 attacks. I was a law student in New York City. I was living in a small apartment in Brooklyn with my then girlfriend, now my wife, mother of 2 kids, who had also been my high school sweetheart. And it was the morning, and I knew she had gone to NYU because she was in school for art history to drop off her thesis. She was her master's program, and she'd gotten it done over the summer. And then I see what's happened on TV. And I realized that the timing was such that she was probably on the subway, and neither of us had cell phones. I spent 3 hours pacing my apartment, our apartment, this little studio we shared like you do when you live in New York. And I didn't know if she was alive or dead. I had no one to call, nothing to do. Family, such as they could get through, were screaming at me, what do we know? I don't know anything. And I looked up to the universe, to God, and said, just please bring her back. Because the other thing was September 11th was the 7th anniversary of the day that I lost my dad, my birth father, who died in a car crash on September 11th, 1994. After a long struggle with first unemployment, underemployment, getting diagnosed with MS, that getting worse, addiction that he already had to alcohol, turning into addiction to that, plus drugs, that getting worse, and then one day he got into a car when he shouldn't have, and he died when I was 17. So it was the 7th year anniversary of that. So I'm just looking up and saying, no, it can't be, not again. But she did come back to me. And then I decided I needed to honor my promise, which undergrad, I'd studied international relations, I spoke Russian, I had some knowledge of the Central Asian STAM countries, as we called them at the time, so I applied to intelligence community agencies. Not in any sense of vengeance, just to protect. I had seen the death around us. We went to church in a parish in Brooklyn Heights. There were several people who died from that parish. It was just, I didn't want others to suffer the death and the fear that I had suffered. So I joined the intelligence community and finally got in 2004 after the long security clearance process and everything. But the thing that is a wrinkle in the story is that I was and am transgender. So what happened was I applied to the intelligence community, I get into the intelligence community, and all the while I'm thinking, when I eventually have to come out, because I figured this out about myself, I knew this about myself as a teenager and just buried it. And then such as I started to accept it, it died in me when my father died. But it was coming back, and I knew I'd have to eventually deal with it. I joined the intelligence community and thought, I'm on borrowed time. I will serve for however long I can. And I was working WMD proliferation, so the movement of materials to help countries like Iran and North Korea have their nuclear programs, their missile programs. My job as an analyst was to figure out where the suppliers were and try to help our diplomats, our military, or sensitive efforts deal with those, so we don't have to go to war. So instead we can just prevent those things from happening. And arms smuggling to terrorist groups, that was my job. And in 2006, I was doing it for a small, unpredictable country in Northeast Asia, which we're dealing with a lot in the news today. And it was at that time I decided I needed to come out. And I didn't think I could stay. I told my chain of command at the time, so I'm a civilian, but I'm working for military people, mostly. And the way I thought that it would go is, well, I'm coming to you saying that this is who I am. Auditorium applauded her. And I'm just doing my job, and it's on closed circuit TV. And then the captain gives the speech that the Human Rights Campaign could have written for him, or one of the other LGBT organizations, talking not just about human values, but Navy values of courage and commitment, because this is the Office of Naval Intelligence. And then the other half of the auditorium applauded. And I just kept doing my job. And I kept doing my job for 11 years. And in those 11 years, what I found is once I came out at work and was myself fully, I had been a very good analyst, but a shy and withdrawn analyst, not a leader by anyone's estimation. But I transitioned. Soon I was a team leader. Then I was the representative for all the fleets and what we call the combatant commands brought to give them intelligence. Then I was a deputy branch chief, a branch chief. Then I was division chief. So then I was running the whole office of all the analysts that I'd come to work for back in 2004. Analysts in multiple agencies, analysts all over the planet. I also did this very quietly because it's the intelligence community. But things started to change in 2016, as you might imagine. Even before the election or even before the campaign, the backlash against transgender people and just some of the rhetoric that was already starting the campaign. And I also realized that no one really known what had happened 11 years ago. So there's all this stuff about what transgender people are and how it's impossible for us to be in certain places. And here I am, the intelligence community, saying, I was doing this under President George W. Bush and Secretary Rumsfeld and leading intelligence delegations to Middle Eastern countries. You're telling me that now we can't serve or now we can't this? You've got to be kidding me. And then Pulse happened too. So I started speaking out. And I got permission to write an op-ed in the Washington Post, which I did shortly after the election. And then an interview with NPR followed and other things. And in all of it, what was coming to me more and more was that though I'd done a great deal of good in the community, in the intelligence community, to protect the country, to keep us out of war, to pay back the debt that I felt that I owed after 9/11, that then there might be a calling outside. And for a very simple reason too. I had a family, I had 2 little boys, and we'd been in DC for 13 years. My parents live in Haverhill, my brother lives in Attleboro. My wife, her mom has 12 siblings. They're mostly in Medford, and she's got a total of 40 first cousins. They're like all of me. So it was just, we've got family and health and support and all that up here, and down here I have weapons of mass destruction, armed smuggling terrorist groups, and now President Trump. So that was, seriously, no. So we decided it was time to go. And we decided to move over the spring. We made it, we told our bosses, it had been such a long time. In June, we made it Facebook official shortly thereafter. And we were gonna move up here and be with family. And I would find some other ways to serve, a nonprofit, something like that. Because I'd also, during that time, because I'm trans and because I come from the LGBT community, there's a community health center in Washington, DC called Women Walker Health. It served about 15,000 patients a year. They brought me onto their board to help them turn around from bankruptcy. They told me this, of course, after I'd signed the papers to get onto the board. And the first board meeting was, welcome to the board. We can't make the next payroll. We brought you because you're a recovering lawyer. That's how I like to call it, recovering lawyer, because I did finish law school, I just didn't practice, and a few others to help us save the clinic. So that was another labor of love for 5 years, finding a way to keep costs down, raise quality. We navigated the ACA, we took advantage of it in every way, and it's a thriving center. So healthcare was another thing that mattered to me. So I figured I'd do something like that when I came up here. Got our kids up here, got my oldest son enrolled in kindergarten, and then Nikki Songus announced her retirement. And I took no notice of it whatsoever at the time, because honestly, it was just, she's a great representative. That's a shame. She's been great on a lot of issues. But that's when the answering the call part comes in, because people started to call me. And much like the previous time, I didn't see myself as a leader or as anyone to be in that role at all at first. But then people started to make the case to me and eventually convince me, which I will now try in some small part to convince you. In the intelligence community, the team of analysts that I served, because I was the division chief but I worked for my analysts. I was theirs. They came from every part of America. They came from every political persuasion. My deputy, for a long time in the role, sent all of his kids to Liberty University. And yet, he would have died for me. I would have died for him. No question. I have seen in my own life that we can actually get stuff done across even impossible seeming divisions, against often impossible seeming problems. Years of my life were wrapped around what eventually became the Iran nuclear deal, for instance. There are other things that I supported over time, problems like Syria, problems like that, where even if you can't solve it all at once, you still have to try, and you still have to find every opportunity to act, because inaction is not accepted. So I take that experience, and it gives me a sense of gratitude, and it gives me a sense of optimism, and it gives me a sense of faith in myself, because I've done it, to get things done where I worked under a Bush administration, an Obama administration, and yes, Trump administration, through government, with other governments, to get these things done. So that's item number one, because I've had to do that in difficult environments outside of Massachusetts, where it's mostly a Democratic state. So I feel I'm the best in this political moment to do that. Someone from outside the process, someone new. The other part of it is I bring the experience of being of the working and middle class. I have told you what I grew up with my father. So that's item number one. I have a wife. I have 2 little kids. We have student loans, still have them. We have daycare costs. We moved from DC, the jurisdiction with the highest daycare costs in the country, childcare, to Massachusetts, number 2. Yeah. So I understand those challenges. On the healthcare side, as a transgender woman, with my father's own struggles, I know those challenges all too well. And frankly, for our part of Massachusetts, particularly further north and west, more towards Haverhill and more that way, the opioid epidemic, though it spares none of us, it's really bad up there, and really bad throughout Massachusetts. And my own father's struggle animates my attention to that issue. That's not something that's on and off for me, because I have seen how that ripples through the generations, because my children will never know their grandfather. And that's partially why. So those are key issues that I want to focus on, and that I bring that personal lived experience for. So it's that combination of being able to actually get the things done, the lived experience of the issues, and the fact that I have shown in my life the courage to actually do it. Because I am coming from outside this process. I never lay there and dreamed of being a member of Congress one day. It is something that has simply presented itself at this moment, where I humbly offer myself. I will gladly run and be voted in and serve a single term if that's what it means to get good things done and then leave. It's about service. And that's why I'm here. That's why I offered myself up to you. I will say I will happily take any questions that you want. And while we do, Fred's got a sign-up sheet if you want more information as we continue the conversation, because I know we have an agenda of other things to go on. So please feel free.
How long have you lived in Massachusetts?
So this is a funny thing. Here's the conversation with my wife when we were talking about this, where I turned to her, and I don't think I actually used an expletive, though I might have, where she was one who had already been convinced, and I said, wasn't the whole point to be here with them? You could, from our old house in DC, it was almost the House of Cards line of sight, you know, at the beginning, if any of you watch it, where you see the highway going down. We were about 4 blocks away from that spot. So I said that's the whole point. And she said, well, it's really for the kids to grow up in your family. You're not entirely essential to the equation. She's like, well, now I know where I stand, honey. We have been together for 23 years. She asked me to homecoming, and we have been together through such thick and such thin that is the frankness of our communication at this point. But no, yes, I'm willing to go back for that 2/3-ish bit of the time and miss my kids terribly, and then get back here at the weekend.
Do you see any legislative movement that could be taken about the opioid crisis? What are some of the things that you would want to push?
Well, I mean, we've got to actually get the Interdict Act completely through Congress as opposed to just the House. Then expand upon it. What I would like to do is leverage the fact that this is the trafficking of drugs, but I follow the trafficking of other items and bring some of that expertise to be a leader in the debate. And then on the healthcare side, for me, it's not about punishment or detection or disruption as much. It's about the supportive services. It is a public health issue, and it needs to be treated as such. So there, what I would say is you make common cause with the Republicans that are in states that are hardest hit, as Nikki's done. So that's Pennsylvania, that's Ohio, that's Michigan, and you do it by talking to them the right way about it. You talk from lived experience, and you don't spend your time demonizing the other side that there isn't this much money or this much money. You start with them and you peel them off a little bit, and then boom, you pass the bill.
Follow up, what is the research level for that? Because my very not deep research into the issue is that research has been cut. Like, we almost don't know what we're doing in some ways, because the research into some of these issues has just been sliced and diced over the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Is that a way to approach?
That is part of it, and that's another way to get at it, where so much what they call basic research, kind of basic science that happens in NIH and HHS funded and CDC funded grants, all of that has really been pared back over the last few years. And that's something too, where that can be fairly bipartisan. It can be.
This is gonna sound stupid. When is the vote?
It's not for a while. It's in September. The primary vote is in September,
Okay.
and then the general election is in November. So it is the I will be very frank with you, it is the tyranny of too much money in politics and too much fundraising that means people have had to declare. I declared 3 weeks ago, and it is widely viewed that I declared so late, which is so strange and awful to me as a commentary of the money in politics. But though we are fundraising fairly well, but there are some who have other connections that started with this far earlier.
Is there a way to bypass all this big money and just go to the people and get their vote?
And well, such as we can, we're trying to. We are very aggressively courting small donors. We're very proud to say that we have a lot of people that are doing the $5 or $10 a month thing. And that is the working and middle class base that I would like to build, frankly. Though I'm also grateful for people who have given far more, but that's what I like. Yes.
I have two questions.
Please.
How do you feel about Citizens United, and what would you do to combat it? And second question is, can you lay out your plan for your campaign?
Very good. So Citizens United wrongly decided Congress should deal with it by passing a statute nullifying it. And we might need to even do a constitutional amendment, frankly. So that is short form answer to number one. Then number two.
Are you aware that there's a ballot initiative going to be announced? Okay,
Yes,
great.
yes.
Okay.
But for federal action.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
we need-
Okay, got
It's much like many things where Massachusetts might be able to handle some of this sooner. I mean, we were talking earlier about cap and trade and the carbon fee, carbon tax. That would be much better done at the federal level. Massachusetts is probably the more realistic near-term thing, unless I and others are part of a wonderful blue wave that then sweeps through in 2018 and 20, and then we can talk about doing some of that in 20. Now, the plan for the campaign. What I'll say is right now, I'm just starting to do things like this. People don't really want me knocking, or other candidates knocking at their doors right now. There's a lot of, wait, we just voted. We just voted. I'm shopping for the holidays. Please go away and come back New Year's. So I'm doing events like this when I can. In the new year, I'm gonna start doing more of that, just the direct voter contact. What we're also doing is we have an announcement video that we've put out there that sort of tells some of the story of the why and what we're doing. We're going to be following that up with other short videos, and I'm going to be doing things like Facebook Lives and other things where it's just interaction like this, but digitally done. Because what I'll say is, I recently went on Sonnenfeld Boston Herald podcast for a 1 hour live radio interview with him. He's a conservative guy. And the second he sent it in, there were some people, oh, no, don't do that. Sure. The foreign intelligence services I've dealt with, I am not afraid to talk with anybody. So seriously, I think the live events are great because then that way it gives you a chance to test me and to hold me accountable. Like, what do you really know about the issues? Because actually in my Twitter bio, I think they had to compress it down when we put Democratic candidate for Congress, but I used to have policy wonk in there. So as our environmentally oriented comrades were just heading out and I was talking about RPS, I'm like that on a lot of issues. So I'm happy to go into that depth. So I look forward to showcasing that there. And then the rest of the campaign plan, it's over the spring. We then move to much wider swaths of door knocking. There's direct mailers like there always are. I really want to harness the enthusiasm. You mentioned this earlier. I've been so pleased that the Indivisible's progressive Dem groups have been incredibly responsive. We've had a lot of volunteer signups. And again, win or lose, that's the campaign that I want to run and win, which is community-based and community-driven input. So what I also want to say before we run out of time, and I think we're over at this point already, is I welcome feedback. I welcome input and ideas. I will tell you, I am a progressive. Healthcare is a human right. Absolutely, we need to combat climate change. I will champion gun safety, gun control, firearm safety legislation, whatever we need to call it to get it done. Because I've had to fight and combat the transfer of weapons to war zones around the world. And there are weapons of war on the streets of our cities and our towns and our schools. And I have been someone who's gotten a call of there has been a firearms incident across it, and like a firearms incident in the vicinity of my son's old school in DC, and had my heart stop for a moment. And then thankfully it was across the street. But for the grace of God go I, and so many of us. So yes, that's going to be a priority too. So I am a very progressive person by policy, but I also believe in reaching out. And that's where I've also been very pleasantly surprised to see the level of independent and unenrolled support. People who've been outside the process and said, I haven't voted for a Democrat in this long, but I'm gonna vote for you. So that's the plan, harnessing all that energy and then pulling, yes, something would upset.
What is your competition? Who else is running?
It's better to describe my competition and who is not running. So, and I didn't introduce him. This is Fred Rich, my campaign manager. So, So, Fred, is it 12?
12.
12. There are 12 other Democrats. Yeah. So I suggest, for the sake of time, it's probably best for you to look that up online. But it's an array of others, and they're all wonderful public servants.
Yeah.
Any other questions? And again, I'll stick around towards the end if it's all right.
Of course. Well, you're welcome to
So
stay
if
as long as
anyone
you want.
wants to talk to me afterwards, I'm happy to do that. And thanks so much.